Welcome. Thank you for being with us this evening for a time of remembrance, a time of reflection. As we are on the threshold of the 20th anniversary of a day that, for many of us, our lives changed, the world changed. It's an opportunity to look back, an opportunity to look at where we are, and an opportunity to look forward, to be together in community, to allow our hearts to be as tender, as open, as broken as they are. Right now in the Jewish calendar, we are between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's a powerful time of reflection. And as I was thinking about this evening, I was reflecting on the place of remembrance, the place of remembering in many of the great wisdom traditions of our world. On Yom Kippur, there is a particular service, a memorial service called Yizkor, which means remembering. And I learned the other day that the word to remember appears almost 170 times in the Hebrew scriptures. 170 times we're invited and reminded to remember. The sacrament of communion in the Christian tradition started on the evening when Jesus gave the cup and the matzah to his disciples and said, "Eat, drink, and do this in remembrance of me." And of course, in the Sufi tradition of Islam, their gathering for worship is called zikr, which means remembering, remembrance. So we begin our evening together with a prayer that is part of the traditional Yom Kippur service called "We Remember Them." In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. We invite you now to move into a place of inner stillness, to bring to mind and to heart those you wish to remember this evening. These may be people that you lost on 9/11. They may be people you have lost since then. It may be the people you don't know who were lost in the aftermath, in the follow-up, in the reactions to what happened on 9/11. It may be the people you have lost more recently to the COVID pandemic, to violence of any sort. All of those that we wish to lift up in prayer, in love, in remembrance. If you type their names into the chat, and if you be sensitive to each other typing in names so that they're not racing by in the chat, I will read them aloud. My beloved sister, Andrea Ruth Nason Poulin. Marianne. Kathy. Kusha. Sue. Judith. My beloved mother, Johanna Gonschwint. Beverly, Carlton, John. Casey Hill. To my beloved Qigong mentor, Peter Yates. Lorna. Beloved Uncle Harley. My mother, Marty Meacham. Nymph. My mother, Yola Edith de Sables. My mom, Honorine and Elder Maggie. Gerard. My lost community. My dear teacher, Jerry Gwinelli. My granddaughter's beloved Uncle Peter. My beloved father, Nico. Mom. Aunt Mill and Uncle John. All who were murdered for looking Arab after September 11th in the United States. David Helming. Leah Simental. Dao Sifu Shari K. Liu. my stepfather to dementia. All those I could not say goodbye to. Jerry Schaefer, my father, Jerry O'Rourke, the 800,000 people who have died in the war in Afghanistan. Civilians, soldiers, police, insurgents. 800,000 lives. And in all of the other wars. To all of those who have died in sectarian violence everywhere. All of the men and women of color who have died at the hands of police brutality in the United States. The Jews who have died in anti-Semitic attacks in Europe. Native communities living displaced and disconnected. Victims of genocide everywhere. There are 63 million displaced persons right now in the world. 63 million. Fleeing war and violence, fleeing climate catastrophe. People who died of COVID unidentified, away from loved ones. So much suffering in the human family. I lift up the first responders on 9/11. I lift up the people who died on the planes. I lift up all of those who developed illnesses from their work on the pile. We remember the families, especially the children who lost parents, and the parents who lost children. The spouses who lost their beloved. All of the fellow living beings dying in the fires raging all across large swaths of land across the globe. the species that are going extinct in the first human-created mass extinction in the history of the planet. We pray for fuller understanding of this planet, its animals and all creatures, landscapes, waterscapes, beloved plants that exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide with us. May we understand so much more fully. The dying glaciers, the ice caps, the rainforests, the native children who died in missionary schools, whose bodies have recently been discovered. For all of these that we've named, for all who have been lost, but have no one to remember them by name, we offer this prayer. I will not forget you. You are written beautiful and lasting in my mind and heart evermore. I will not forget you. Your heart revolves around the sun, seen as light that has blessed each day that is born. I will not forget you. Held in my memory, our shared hours, treasured. The precious hours of your life on this earth. Now in heaven's infinite hands you rest. I will not forget you, precious soul. Though you shine in other realms tonight, I see the ray of eternal grace you brought to this thankful, fleeting life in this momentary world. I will not forget you. We will not forget you. We remember you. Amen.
So, beloved friends, here we are. How do we hold all of this? How do we make meaning from this degree of suffering? Of course, none of us have the answer. But one thing we can be sure of is rather than trying to escape from what is, rather than trying to run into a future that feels more comfortable, can we create more space, more spaciousness in the present moment with what is? That will be the exploration, the investigation for the rest of this evening, and we will use the tarot as our tool to do that. So very briefly, the tarot is a system that's been used for divination for a very long time. There are many, many decks of tarot. But today we're going to focus really on a part of what's called the major arcana of the tarot. These are 22 cards. And there is one, the first card is actually number 0. It's the Fool. And it's believed or it's understood that the rest of the major arcana is the Fool's journey. So we start off with our journey of individuation, our journey of being a person as a fool, as this person who has a lot of excitement and energy, but not necessarily a lot of understanding. And as we go through each of these archetypes, we become more aware of both the light and the shadow that lives in us, and thereby create more of a fuller experience of who we are. So today we're going to just look at 3 of the major arcana cards, and we're going to start with the card that's called the Tower. David, if you can pull up that card so people can see, thank you. So this card is, it's called the Tower, and in many Jungian circles, it's specifically called the lightning struck tower. And what I want to do is just briefly outline some of the images, because these cards are very, very old, so the images are not very clear. So I just want to speak about some elements. So in this tower, what we see is, of course, a tower. We see that it doesn't have a proper door. There doesn't seem to be an easy way of entry and exit from this place. It's probably surrounded by mountains or difficult to get to. High up in the tower, there are a few tiny windows. And once upon a time, this tower seemed to have had a crown on it. And lightning has struck and the crown has been displaced. And the people who were hiding in that tower had no other option but to jump out of these tiny windows. An image that's very reminiscent for many of us who have seen the images. I think all of us have seen the images from 9/11. Interestingly, these people who were high up on the tower are falling toward the ground. They look scared and disoriented, but they're fully clothed. One of them has a crown on. I think that's enough of explaining or describing the image on this card. And next, what I want to do is to just talk about the 2 cards, that the one that precedes this in the arcana and the one that follows it, because we often understand these 22 cards as an arc of progression of the personality. As we develop more and more self-realization, each of these archetypes we work with them. We not necessarily integrate them, but we work with them. So the card that comes right before the Tower is called the Devil. So David, yeah. So this card is called the Devil, El Diablo. And here what's interesting to see is the devil, of course, is center stage. And he has horns, he has cloven feet, so reminiscent of the god Pan from antiquity. And then there are these 2 beings. One looks more masculine, one looks more feminine. They are chained to where the devil is sitting, but they seem to be oblivious that the devil is even there. They're looking at us. They're not even aware, maybe, that the devil is there, and they're in some ways chained to the world of the devil. The devil, interestingly, has in 2 hands. In one hand, he has a firebrand, but the other hand has kind of an all is well symbol. So that's interesting too. And what does that mean? And of course, he's not only horned and hooved, but he also has wings, bat wings. So those are the images from this card, and we'll go to the last card, which is the star, which is the card that follows the tower. And yeah, so that's the card. And here, what we are looking at is this one person. They have shed their clothing, shed their persona. Interestingly, it seems like it's a feminine person, but we could also say it's an androgynous person. They have one foot on the solid ground and one foot in water. They're picking up water from this pool, this source of water. And interestingly, they're pouring some of the water on the earth, making the earth green and alive. And some of the water is being poured back into the pool. Behind this person, we see a tree and a bird, and we see 8 stars in the sky, and one of them is more prominent than the other 7, but they're total 8 stars. So I think I'm going to stop with the description of the cards here. And what we're going to do next is we're going to have a video where we're going to go through these cards a few times, and there's going to be music. And you are invited to reflect on these cards and see what comes up for you with these 3 cards. You can either write or you can reflect, and then we'll have some time of sharing after that. So now is an opportunity to speak into the room your reflections of what these three cards, individually and the progression from devil to tower to star, speaks for you, especially in the context both of the 20th anniversary of 9/11 and the moment that we are currently living in, which also feels like a very, shall we say, complex moment.
First, I want to say thank you to both of you for this offering. So moving, such deep feelings remembering 9/11 and this past year, the loss. It's for space, creating the safe space to talk about it. So I was struck by the tower card, the small windows, the people jumping out, as you mentioned in your narrative. And then the star card, and I don't think I'm doing it in the order you mentioned, but I didn't realize that the devil was first. I must have missed that on the screen. The star card, that the figure in the card is concentrating more on pouring water, on the wisdom, the purity, the simplicity of that than the galaxy, the stars that might offer. And then the devil being devilish and the innocent people chained in front. I am complete.
Hi, everyone. I too want to thank you both so much for your clarity and wisdom. I have to say, I am stunned by these tarot cards. I've had my cards read, but I've never spent a lot of time looking at the visuals of these decks, and good gracious. I was not expecting this, and I wasn't expecting all of these pieces, and like, whoa, this is like soul collage on elevation. So, what really struck me was how religious they feel, and how spiritually connected. And for me, the devil, it's interesting because in these cards, in that card specifically, it feels like the devil is actually Christian God. And for me, what I saw was Adam and Eve being chained by a Christian God, which was really shocking to see that portrayed as a devil. It just was really surprising. And I kept in different rotations of the cards during the video, which I really appreciated. And I'm not sure if you did this on purpose or if other people experienced this, but I was noticing different themes with the cards. So like in the beginning, it was like the overall idea, which for me felt like sort of Christian male dominated patriarchy, and then sort of the fall of that with the tower, and then the return, hopefully, of interconnectedness and sort of transcendence of the laws of nature, and reconnection to the earth and to nourishing the earth and interconnectedness. But then noticing the feel of the people, the humans, like the emotion. With the devil card, they seemed almost like blank or like depressed. And then in the tower card, they were scared. And then in the star card, she's really at peace. And of course, also noticing like the progression of control of the men and women. And then it was just, to me, they looked like men falling in the tower, and then sort of the return to the feminine interconnectedness. So there's a lot there, but wow, my goodness, I had no idea that there was so much in these cards. And it's a really beautiful reminder right now, because my feeling is that we're still very much in the tower card. And it's very hopeful and helpful to remember that the progression is hopefully leading to that star. So, yeah. Thank you.
I'd like to say something about it. How I saw it is that the devil is more of our shadow side that we sometimes are not aware about that we have, and that the apocalypse of the tower, these kind of events in our lives makes us process a lot, and that it can bring us to the next one with the stars. And what I noticed is that there are a few, like 7, I think, little stars, small ones, and one big one. So for me, that means that we in life experience more of these kind of things. And we sometimes need, it's not really the right word, but we need more of these kind of events before that really big star comes. So we also have a choice in that tower. Are we going back to the devil? Because I was thinking like, yeah, but in these times, it's not all of us that are going to that star. We also have people who stuck and even more to the devil side. And this is a time that we can choose, and that we can choose to grow towards becoming that eighth star. And I wonder why it's 8. You probably can explain that more, but why it's 8 and not, for example, 7. But it's more the symbolic part of it. But that that made me a lot aware about the time we live in, and I also live in, and about my experience. I have a choice, and what choice do I want to make?
I wanted to say that I noticed that there were 2 people that were chained to their perspective to begin with, and then 2 people falling in the same experience, but were free, but going through a horrendous experience together. And then there was one being, and I saw that as a radical unpacking of our stuck perspective into a shared experience, and then into a oneness that overcomes dualism. And also many things I noticed, but that's the one I wanted to share. Thank you.
I'm Hilary from New Zealand, and I want to say huge gratitude to you, Diane. So wonderful to see you, and to you, Shamita, for bringing such a beautiful ritual to us today. And I found such richness in those cards, and feel that just very simply, one aspect that came to me was from being tethered to a place of freedom often requires going through and emptying out. And that feels a very familiar journey to me, and I'm sure it does to many. So thank you. It's a total joy to be here with you.
I don't have my video on just because I wasn't prepared to do that, but I just want to say that for me, the devil is a metaphor for illusion, and the tower is maybe also an illusion, but also feels to me like a construction that people try to kind of overcome. Anyway, there's a certain sense of an illusory need to build a tower, and sort of maybe self-sufficiency, or the whole idea that we're needing to strive or to become something, but it doesn't work because there are other forces at work, and we need to abandon that, which is a positive thing. And then we get to just chillax, for a better word, for lack of a better word, in the star card, which I think is the truth. And I think ultimately that's where we all are. If we can just relax and stop trying to be something we're not and listening to voices that aren't real. I also, this is the first time I've been involved with your community, and I was really excited about opening my thought to new things that I've judged in the past, like tarot, because I'm from a kind of a background that would not have usually gone that direction. But I just want to say that I do hope moving forward that there isn't any negative derogatory comments made about certain faiths, because I'm doing my best to not voice derogatory comments about people's beliefs. So I'm just hoping that interfaith is a real term, and it means that regardless of historical problems, that all faiths are okay and have something to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And thank you for the reminder.
I just want to point out to people, there's a comment, a perceptive comment in the chat from Sue. It says, in the devil card, the two are chained loosely and could get free if they wanted to, but they choose to stay in their ignorance. I want to remind you, since I can, are these truly people? They have tails.
And horns.
Yes. So I just wanted to throw that in there, see what comes of it.
This is Leslie.
Mhm.
And I want to also say that I was actually looking forward greatly to this gathering because for some reason, moving through the 20-year anniversary of this event, for some reason, this has been very, very difficult for me this time around. And I very, very much appreciate this very safe space in which we can use our voices, and mine as well. I had just started seminary. Reverend Diane was with you, and we were in that first weekend, and then the following Tuesday, just 2 days, 3 days later. And I was very honored and privileged, saddened and sombered to watch our deans, who were already in the field of ministry, mobilizing and coming back to classes with their stories. And we were in a healing process together for many months. When I saw it, and I was get back to the cards, I saw the devil card. Just one thought came to me: forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. I won't go further with that. We're running out of time. But when I saw the Tower card, in the ensuing months, even years, but really in the months after the actual event of September 11th, I remember seeing some replays just from people's phones and, witnesses, whatever, of people taking their deaths into their own hands from so high up. And I remember seeing one young man. He was in a window for quite a while. And finally he stood up, and with his back to the open air and his arms completely outstretched, he chose to fall backward and, into outer space. I was contrasting the image of him and his face, which looked calm and was probably numb, who knows, with these two terrified people on the card. You could see the hands gnarled, the fingers outstretched, whatever. They really was bespeaking their terror. And here this man, as well as how many others having to deal with that in their own way. And there was another of a man and a woman who were facing their deaths by leaping out of a window. And they looked at each other, they spoke, and they held hands. They counted, and they jumped at the same time in solidarity. When I saw the star card, it was such a relief because it was a great cleansing water coming out of two vessels, the stars. And for me at that point, that one card was serene, hopeful, helpful, and brought me back to a deep state of prayer. May we all be cleansed. May we realize our inner witnesses so that we do not have to be chained to the devil of emotional reactions, which can cause so much suffering, and the perspectives and prejudices and what have you. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Leslie. Any other burning comments? If not, we'll start to bring it to a close. Okay, so I mean, really the entire spectrum of what these cards stand for has been spoken in the room by different people. The one thing that actually Joan was referring to is where I think I would like to bring the conversation back as we close, which is that we have a choice. When we're falling from that tower, the tower of, you can call it the ego. In fact, the tower in the literature is often referred to as, or simulated to be, the Tower of Babel. That was actually something that was constructed by King Nimrod to force the place of the gods, to storm the heavens and get the wisdom of the heavens, which is what we do in our ego. And of course, these people are now falling. They're coming closer to the ground, closer to the earth. But there is a choice. They can choose to go back to the oblivion of being with the devil, which is this kind of devouring energy. I will consume, I'll consume, I'll consume, and I'll become numb, to the point that, as David pointed out, that I'm not even aware whether I'm human or I'm some other being with horns and my tail is on fire. I'm not even aware of it. One of the figures has their tail on fire. Or the option is to be this being in the star, the singular, you can say a hermaphroditic being, the being who has integrated both masculine and feminine. And what's interesting is that they are picking up this water from the pool, which is the unconscious, the emotional world, the shadow world. And what they're doing is they're taking aspects of that, they're discerning, and they're taking aspects of that, they're putting it on the ground of consciousness. So the ground of consciousness can be watered, and it can be alive, and it can bloom, and it can have trees and flowers, and birds can sing. But what is very interesting is that there's that discernment that not everything of the archetype can be integrated into the personality. That would become inflation. We don't want to become gods. The archetypal power, only some of it can be integrated in the personality. More than that will cause inflation. So this person has the discernment of knowing what aspects of this archetype is actually going to water the garden, if you will, and what aspects of the archetype actually needs to go back to the collective unconscious, to this pool of the unconscious world. And not only that, it's interesting to think about the fact that they have taken this water out, it's been aerated. Some new thought, some new process, some new way of being has been integrated into this water, which is now going back into the collective. So actually the collective is richer for this person's solo discernment. And we can talk, Joan, you spoke about why 8. We can have a whole other session on that. But just very briefly to say that Jung was a big believer in the quaternity being a symbol of completion. And double quaternity is like even more powerful because it's being emphasized. So it's a symbol of the disparate pieces coming together and finding a place of completion. Yeah, Joan wanted to say something. Go ahead, Joan.
Well, I wonder what strikes me in the painting also in the star of the star is that you say that they pick up the water from the source, but you actually do not see them pick up the water. So you can ask yourself, who's the source here?
Yeah, indeed.
And I think what I would like to speak to in our closing minutes, Sushmita just beautifully spoke to the process of the individual. I'd like to speak to the process of the collective. I think for many of us, it is striking that 20 years after 9/11, as we leave Afghanistan, the Taliban is back in power. And I think that the imagery of the choice that Joan brought up and that the choice being, do we go back to our old ways or do we find a way forward? And I think very much 20 years ago, we went back to our old ways of responding to violence with more violence, of responding to this profound wake-up call with a plea to go shopping, to reinforce our materialistic obsession. And so 20 years later, having gone back to our old ways, wanting to get back to normal as quickly as possible, we find ourselves going through the cycle again. This time, our tower is COVID, and it's happening not just here, but globally. And again, so much of the conversation you hear is, how soon can we go back to normal? And please, dear God, let us not go back to normal. Let us find what it means to move forward into the star, into what that vision of integration, of unity, of living in harmony with the natural world, of respect for all of the natural forces. I don't think any of us know what that's going to look like. But I think in the deepest part of us, we glimpse. And it's that possibility that keeps us going. It's that possibility that moves us forward. I think it's important for each of us tonight, and after tonight to do some reflecting on how do I help the collective consciousness of humanity move toward the vision of the star. I so appreciate Amy bringing up her inner discomfort with an expression of disparagement of a different perspective, because that, and I very much appreciate the beautiful apology that Devin typed into the chat and clarification of her intention, because that's the work. Being willing to speak the truth in the moment, having the courage in the moment to say, ouch, when someone says or does something that is hurtful, not simply letting it pass, but having the faith in each other, in each other's basic goodness, to give voice and to say, you know, I think if you realize that what you said just now was hurtful, you wouldn't have said it. You would have thought about it differently. Having that much faith in one another, that we might just be able to move forward. Our closing song for the evening is, the title of it is Service. And I think that the more each of us can turn our attention and intention to whatever it is that we can contribute to the flourishing of understanding, of love, of compassion, of healing, of peace and reconciliation in this world, is part of how we move into the star. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your beautiful openness, for your beautiful souls. May we all be healed. May we all be a source of healing for others and for this precious world. Amen.